everyone, Chris here, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about the books I read from June 1st through June 7th. First up, I'm going to group these first 10 books together, and they are a bunch of the manga from the Warrior series. I will go through them separately in a second, but if you're new to my channel, Warriors is a series that follows forest cats who live in clans and have to try to coexist. So these are little mini journeys about certain characters in the Warriors universe, and I will go through them separately so you kind of know what they're about, and I will tell you what I thought of each of them. So first up, I have a bind-up of Gray Stripe's Adventure, which includes The Lost Warrior, which I gave 4.25 stars, Warrior's Refuge, which I gave 4.25 stars, and Warrior's Return, which I gave 4.5 stars. So this manga series follows Gray Stripe, and if you've read any of the Warriors books, you know who Gray Stripe is, because you meet Gray Stripe in the very first book in the Warriors series. I can't tell you what Gray Stripe is doing in these books, as it will spoil something that happens in the greater Warriors universe. But basically, we get to see a bit of time in Gray Stripe's life, and this manga series is told from Gray Stripe's point of view, so we get to be in Gray Stripe's head for a change. And I thought that was quite interesting. It was interesting to get to see what was happening to Gray Stripe and the thoughts and feelings Gray Stripe was having during this period of time in his life. It was also interesting to get to see Gray Stripe kind of brought to life, because before that we've never really had any pictures of the cat, so it was quite interesting to get to see him as more than just something I pictured in my head. I really enjoyed Gray Stripe's journey and getting to see his thoughts and feelings, and I would definitely love to spend more time with Gray Stripe in the future. The next chunk I read were about Ravenpaw, and again, if you've read the first book in the first arc, you know who Ravenpaw is. So the three are Shatter Peace, which I gave 4 stars, A Clan in Need, which I gave 4.25 stars, and The Heart of a Warrior, which I gave 4.25 stars. So Ravenpaw is one of my favorite characters throughout the entire Warrior series and all the books I've read, and so I loved getting to spend time with Ravenpaw. Again, I can't really tell you what he's doing because it spoils other books in the series. But if you love Ravenpaw, you should definitely check these books out, because it is so much fun to spend some more time with Ravenpaw and get a look into his head and his thoughts and feelings. I didn't enjoy these quite as much as Gray Stripes, but I did really enjoy them, and like I said, I'm really glad I got to spend some more time with Ravenpaw and to get a glimpse into his head and see where his motivations were coming from in a way that you can't when you're looking at him through another character's perspective. Next up, I read the Tiger Star and Sasha mangas, and I gave Into the Woods, Escape from the Forest, and Return to the Clans 5 stars, all 3 of them. So in these books, we meet a character named Sasha who crosses paths with Tiger Star, and we get to see how she came to meet them and how their relationship developed. And again, it is very hard to talk about these books without talking about things that have happened later in the series. Sasha, when I met her in the arcs of 6, I didn't like her character very much, but getting to see why Sasha became the way she was and why she made the decisions she made and behaved the way she did made me like her a lot more. I loved getting this look into Sasha's world and seeing how she became the cat that Fireheart and the rest of ThunderClan interacted with when they crossed her path. And the last manga I read is the Rise of Scourge, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. He is a character we meet in the first arc of 6, and I don't want to say where, when, or why, but it was interesting getting to see how Scourge became the cat that we meet in the books. I liked getting to see his backstory, I liked getting to see his character develop, and I liked having a better understanding of who he is as a character and why he makes the decisions he makes. Overall with these, I think they fill in some important little gaps in the Warriors universe, and if you are a big fan of Warriors, I definitely suggest you check these out and give them a read, because they definitely add to the overall story and give you a glimpse into characters that you maybe haven't gotten to spend as much time with, and you don't understand as much of the motivations behind why they do the things they do, including Graystripe, who is a pretty big character. Even him is somebody who I think you learn a lot about by reading his manga. So I would definitely suggest, if you're a fan of warriors, to check these out. Next up, I read Dark Whispers by Vashti Hardy, and I gave this book 5 stars. This is the second book in the Bright Storm series. In that series, we follow twins, Maudie and Arthur. In the first book, their father is an explorer who ends up dying on an expedition, and it really costs Maudie and Arthur everything. Especially when one of the other teams, who was on a similar expedition to their father, accuses their father of trying to sabotage their expedition. Like, that accusation is really what causes them to lose everything, and even though Maudie and Arthur don't believe it, they don't have any proof that he didn't, as he's dead and he can't defend himself. They end up joining another crew and follow in their father's footsteps and go on an expedition to kind of see if they can't uncover some clues about what really happened during their father's last expedition, and see if they can figure out if he really did what he was accused of, or if they can find some sort of proof that what the other team is saying is a lie. In this book, the twins are heading out to find a missing explorer, and along the way they get separated and have to find their way back to one another. I love this series. I love Maudie and Arthur, and I love getting to see the different lands they get to explore and how each of them has a different view of these places and the people they encounter. And I also love that they're very, very different. And I love getting to see also how much their love is demonstrated for each other, especially when each other is all they have left of their, like, biological family. Even though they've built this kind of found family, it's different with them, especially being twins. So I liked getting to see the separation this time, and kind of getting to see them both kind of have to develop on their own and grow as human beings while being separated from one another. And I don't know, I really love the adventure in this story and how it kind of tied into some of the stuff that happened during their first journey. And I'm very curious, based on the events of this book, to see what would happen if there is a next book. I think there's going to be a next book. I don't think this was a duology. I think there's going to be at least another book. So I'm very curious to see what happens next based on the developments of what happened in this one. I really, really love this book and these characters, and I definitely want more out of this world and these characters. Next up, I read Saga Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, and I gave this book 4 stars. In this graphic novel, we're following a world that is at war. Basically, a planet and a moon are at war with each other, and they've kind of drawn in every other developed world into this war, and they're bitter enemies. And we're following these 2 characters, Alana and Marco. And Alana is one of the residents of the planet, and Marco is one of the residents of the moon. And basically they were both fighting in this war, and they ended up coming across each other and falling in love and having a baby, which is a big no-no because their species aren't supposed to procreate. They're supposed to kill each other and despise one another. And so this leads to so many different people chasing them, trying to capture them and or kill them, and capture and or kill their child. And they have to try to stay one step ahead of all of these people who want to do them and their family harm. So I actually really liked this book. I was not expecting to like this series. So an adult sci-fi graphic novel, I didn't think it was going to be my cup of tea. I know it is very loved on BookTube, at least by the people I follow. And since it was a host favorite for Whatever-a-thon, I thought this would be a good time to check it out. And I'm actually really glad I did, because I found the story very intriguing. This kind of forbidden love, and getting to see how much Marco and Alana care about each other and have to try to work around their differences. And I became very invested in their characters and their family. And I'm very curious to see what happens with them and their daughter next. So I will definitely be checking out more in this series. Next up, I read The Tea Dragon Festival by Kay O'Neill, and I gave this book 5 stars. This is the second book in the Tea Dragon Society series. And in this book, we're following a character called Rin. She has grown up in a village that contains tea dragons. One day while she's out and about, she stumbles across an actual dragon. He was meant to protect their town, but he fell asleep for like 80 years, and he's feeling really bad about it. Rin, her uncle, and her uncle's partner end up looking into what caused the dragon to fall asleep for so long, and helping him come to terms with the time that he lost. So just like the Tea Dragon Society, this is a really, really sweet graphic novel. Like, it's just got such a cute vibe, and I love the Tea Dragons and the representation that are in these books. And I really liked getting to see Ren make friends with this dragon and help him deal with what had happened to him. And I liked getting to see their relationship develop, and it's such a sweet, cute book. And like I said, I love the drawing, I love the writing. It is, at least for me, one of those books that I would love to own these books someday, because they just make my heart feel good when I read them, and sometimes you just need a book that makes you happy. Next up, I read The Never Tilting World by Rin Chupeco, and I gave this book 4 stars. So there are 4 points of view in this book. 2 are daughters of goddesses. 1 is a healer, and 1 is a scavenger, and they live in this world that has kind of been broken. The world no longer turns. Basically, there was like a prophecy that the goddesses had to fulfill, and they didn't do it, so the world kind of broke and stopped turning. So half the world is in eternal daylight, and the other half is in eternal darkness. And the daughters start to feel pulled to the area in between where the darkness and the daylight kind of meet. And one of them is accompanied by the healer, and the other is accompanied by the scavenger, and they kind of go on a journey to what is known as the abyss, where the darkness meets the day. And along the way, they learn a lot about themselves and how the world came to be the way it is. It is very complicated to explain without kind of spoiling things, I think. However, I did really, really enjoy this book. I liked getting to see the journeys that each duo went on and how different those journeys were, how they kind of put the pieces together about where they were going to end up and what was going on. You get to see things from all 4 characters' point of view, and I think that also helps to add to the story, because obviously the healer and the scavenger have a different view of the world than the daughters of goddesses do. So I think that definitely was an important part of the story, and I like the way that it ended and where it ended, because it definitely made me want to pick up the next book, because I want to know what happens next. They find some things out at the end that definitely leave me with a lot of questions and make me want to check out the next book in this series. Next up, I read Escape from Aurora by Jamie Littler, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. So this is the second book in the Frostheart series. In the first book, we're following Ash, whose parents were pathfinders, and they set out from the stronghold where they and Ash resided, and they never returned. The world where Ash lives is a kind of like a tundra, and there are monsters that live underneath the snow, so staying in the strongholds is very important because that's where it's safe. And pathfinders take a risk every time they leave a stronghold, but that's the only way to get supplies from one stronghold to another. This leads everybody to believe that Ash's parents didn't make it because of how dangerous it is to travel from one stronghold to another in the first place. Ash, however, is a little different. He has the ability to song weave, and this is not something that he should boast about, because his people believe that song weaving opens your mind up in a way that the monsters can control you, and you would then be forced to say, let them in the stronghold and slaughter everybody you live with. So he kind of has to keep his power under wraps. Unfortunately, one day he ends up unleashing his power, and his stronghold decides to throw him out. Luckily, the crew of the Frostheart happens to be there, and they're willing to let Ash travel with them. So he sets out on the Frostheart in the hopes of finding out the truth of what happened to his parents. In this book, we're continuing Ash's journey, and we're getting to see him continue the quest to find out what happened to his family. I really love Ash and his crew and the dynamics there. I loved getting to see this leg of Ash's journey and the characters he encounters and the things he learns about himself and his parents along the way. The end of this book made me want to throw the book across the room, because it ends in such a way that I am so angry I do not have book 3. I cannot believe they I cannot believe Jamie Littler ended it where he did, because I need book 3. I need it yesterday. I cannot wait for book 3 in this series. I want to know what happens. And oh my god, the end of book 2. Just, I warn you now, if you're gonna read book 2, be prepared to be upset that you do not have immediate access to book 3, because the ending. That's all I'm gonna say. Just keep that in mind if you pick it up. But I love this book, I love the series, and obviously I cannot wait for book 3. Next up, I read The Fantastic Tales of Nothing by Alejandra Green and Fanny Rodriguez, and I gave this book 4 stars. This is a graphic novel. We'll give you a look at our main character here. So that's Nathan and a bit of his world. And Nathan believes he's just a regular human. He lives in a world where Vulcan and humans sort of peacefully exist together, and the Vulcans have magic and humans do not. Then one day he crosses paths with a character named Haven, who is neither human or Vulcan. He has no idea what Haven is, and they end up kind of going on the run. Shortly thereafter, he realizes he has magic when humans aren't supposed to, so there are lots of people who would love to get their hands on Nathan. He and Haven and some new friends that they make along the way end up going on a perilous journey to prevent a war and save their land. I love that in this book, Nathan's like, what do you mean I have magic? I can't have magic. I can't possibly have magic. And is just so completely dumbfounded with the idea that he would be graced to be the one human that has the ability to wield magic. And a lot of times it kind of has like that chosen one trope. He's the chosen one. He's the one that got the magic, but he is so not so does not have the mentality of a chosen one. And I really, really like that. Because again, he's like, what do you mean me? No, you can't mean me. I'm just Nathan. but not in a way that is dislikable, in a way of like, I don't want any of this, please leave me alone, you must be mistaken, like, are you sure? And I think that's very, very interesting, and I really, really like Haven and getting to see their interactions with everybody, because they aren't Vulcan and they aren't human, and nobody quite knows what Haven is, and it is interesting to see how that develops and the role Haven plays in this perilous journey that Nathan, Haven, and their friends go out on. I believe this is the first book in a series, and I would definitely pick up another book set in this world, because the characters are just really, really likable, and I really like the art style, and it was a quick and easy read, so I would definitely pick up another book in this series. Next up, I read Lightfall, The Girl and the Galdurian by Tim Probert, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. This is another graphic novel. And here we have one of our main characters, so you can get an idea of the art style. So in this book, we're following Bee, who is a girl and one day crosses paths with Cad, who is a member of an ancient race known as the Galdurian that is thought to be extinct. Cad is looking for the Pig Wizard, as he thinks the Pig Wizard can help him find more of his people. This is a lucky coincidence that he's crossed paths with Bee, because the Pig Wizard is Bee's adoptive grandfather. So Bee agrees to bring Cad home so that he can ask the Pig Wizard for help. Unfortunately, once they get there, her grandfather is gone. All that's left is a note and the jar of endless flame. Bee is terribly worried about her grandfather and decides that she's going to find him. Cad tells her that he'd like to accompany her on her journey. 1, because he needs to see the Pig Wizard anyway, and 2, because he wants to help her out. So the two of them set out on this journey to track down Bee's grandfather. I really enjoyed this book and getting to see Bee go on this journey and how much she worried about her grandfather and how that affected the way she behaved, and how Cad needs her grandfather because he thinks that her grandfather is his only hope of finding his people, but at the same time, he is the type of person that even though he hasn't known Bee long, he cares enough that he wants to help her find her grandfather because he can see how important her grandfather is to her. I also think it's interesting that they don't realize the depth of the journey they are setting out on or the full scope of what is going on with her grandfather, and I think it is interesting to see them discover that as the story progresses. I am very curious to see where the story goes next, and will definitely be reading the next book in this series. Next up, I read The Map of Stories by Anna James, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. This is the third book in the Map of Stories series. In this series, we follow a girl named Tilly who has the ability to book wander. What this means is that she can travel into books, and occasionally she can pull characters out of books to interact with her. This is something she discovers in the first book in the series. I can't talk too much about the plot of this book because it's the third book in the series, but I'm still enjoying Tilly's adventures. I love getting to see the stories that Tilly enters in this book and how things are changing based on the events in the first two books. I am still loving Tilly's friendship that she made in the first book, and I love getting to see some of the new characters she got to interact with in this book. I'm still very curious as to what is going to be happening in the next book in the series, which I believe comes out soon. I think it comes out in the next few months, and I am definitely looking forward to reading that. I still love the idea of book wandering because I don't know how, as somebody who loves reading, you wouldn't want to be able to wander into one of your favorite books and get to interact with characters you love or get to see a world you love. So I love the premise of these books, and I love getting to see Tilly and the adventures and how book wandering plays into those adventures, or characters coming out of those books plays into her adventures. And I'm really curious to see what happens next in the series. Next up, I read Nevermoor, The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. This is a reread for me. If you don't know about Nevermoor, it follows a girl named Morgan Crow who is cursed to die on her 11th birthday. She's as prepared as one can be to do this until, on the eve of her 11th birthday, Jupiter North swoops down and whisks her way to the land of Nevermoor, where she has to go through these trials so that she can be part of the Nevermoor Society, so that she will be allowed to stay in Nevermoor and not have to return to her world where she would die. I adore this book. I love Morgan, and I love getting to see her discover this new world, and even though I've read it multiple times now, I still love getting to discover this world all over with her again. I love getting to see her develop friendships with the new people that she comes across, and her worry over what happens if she can't become part of the Nevermoor Society, and her relationship with Jupiter and how that develops, because he is her savior, essentially. He's the one that came and got her, and I love seeing her relationship with him develop. This is such a good series, and if you like middle grade, and you like middle grade fantasies especially, and you haven't checked this out, I don't know why. It's such a good book, and I highly recommend you give this series a try because it is so good. Next up, I read A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab, and I gave this book 3.5 stars. This is the second book in the Shades of Magic trilogy. So basically, in the first book, we're living in a world where there are 4 Londons: Red London, White London, Grey London, and Black London. The doors to the Londons are closed, and you can't really travel between them at all, unless you're one of the select few, and one of our main characters is Cal, and he has the ability to travel between the Londons. He has official duties that require him to travel between the Londons, and I mean, since he's one of the few people that do it, he really has no choice. But he also smuggles stuff in between the Londons, even though he knows he's not supposed to. This leads him to danger, and he ends up crossing paths with Delilah. Delilah is a thief who lives in Grey London. She ends up robbing Cal, and then saving him, and then gets him to bring her back to Red London with him, which is the London Cal is from. When things end up going pear-shaped, they end up having to work together to save not just themselves, but all the Londons. So in this book, Delilah and Cal kind of go their separate ways, and we get to see what their lives are like after the events of book 1. If you've read book 1, you know that for both of them, a lot of things have changed due to the events of book 1, and it is interesting to see how those events have changed both of them as people. It is also interesting to see how the events of book 1 have affected the Londons and how that plays into the greater story. I don't think I can say too much more without spoiling things. I guess I could also say that there is a magical competition going on, and both Delilah and Kel hear about it and are very intrigued by this tournament that is going to be going on, and it plays a big part in the plot of this book. I did not enjoy this one as much as the first one. There were parts of this that I found really, really slow. We meet a character in this book named Alucard, and I love him. He is my favorite character in the series so far, and I love getting to spend time with him. I think he's a very interesting character. He was easily my favorite character in this series so far, and I don't know, there were just bits and pieces of this book that were a bit slow for me, and I was just like, okay, get to the point. I will definitely finish out this trilogy, but I'm not as enthusiastic to finish it out as I was at the end of book 1. Next up, I read Snapdragon by Kate Leigh, and I gave this book 5 stars. This is another graphic novel, and we follow Snapdragon, which is her here. And she lives in a town where they believe there's a witch, though Snapdragon learns real quick that Jax isn't actually a witch. Once she finds out what Jax actually does, she wants to help. She finds it interesting. While she's there, she learns there's even more to Jax than she thought, and she learns something surprising about someone from Jax's past. I thought this was such a cool book. I liked getting to see Snap learn more about Jax and their interaction. So Jax takes roadkill and ends up getting it to a state where she can rebuild the skeleton and then selling the skeleton of these dead animals online. Snap thinks this is such a cool thing, and it makes her want to learn all about animal anatomy and stuff, and I think it is interesting to see Snap kind of fall in love with this very weird job that Jax has. I like getting to see Jax, who, as I said, everybody thinks Jax is a witch, so I get the feeling people are not so nice to her. So it is interesting to see Jax kind of open up to Snap and get to learn more about Jax as she kind of lets her guard down with Snap. I believe this is a standalone, which is a shame because I would love to get to see more with Snap and Jax and all of the characters we meet in this book, but I really enjoyed this book and am really glad that I picked it up. Next up, I read Extraordinary Birds by Sandy Stark McGinnis, and I gave this book 1.5 stars. So in this book, we're following December, who is in foster care and believes she's turning into a bird. She ends up with a woman named Eleanor, who might be able to give her the home she's always wanted, but she also doesn't want to get attached because she knows once she turns into a bird, she's not going to be able to stay. This is hard because while December knows she's going to turn into a bird, she's never told anybody that, and she's also growing attached to Eleanor, and she worries that it will make it harder for her to finally become the bird she knows she's always meant to be. This sounded like it had a cool premise. The idea that December believed she was turning into a bird was a little absurd, but I also thought it was maybe her way of dealing with being kind of bounced from foster home to foster home, and I was expecting to kind of see her shed that as she grew close to Eleanor, but I believe there was a point in time when she really did believe she was going to turn into a bird, and she was like flinging herself out of trees, and I was worried for her mental well-being and the fact that none of the grown-ups in her life seemed to do anything about the fact that she could get seriously injured by throwing herself out of a tree. I also didn't like that one of the characters December meets is another kid in her class, and this child is trans, and we see other characters who knew them before she transitioned using the wrong pronouns and her old name, and nobody seems to care that this child is being treated that way. And that really, really bothered me because that is not okay. And I didn't like the fact that there was nobody in this book addressing the fact that this trans child was being treated so horribly. It just feels like such a wrong message to send to a middle grader reading this, that if a child in their school tells everybody, hey, I'm a girl, I've always been a girl, you just didn't know I was a girl, but I'm a girl now, so here is my new name, please dress me as such. And they continue to address her with he, him pronouns and using the name they have shed. And nobody says anything about how wrong it is. It is teaching middle graders that if that happens to them, that it's okay for them to just disregard this person's pronouns and name preference. And that bothered me so incredibly much. December is completely accepting of this character, and I love that December does not even bat an eyelash. But it's like, I'm not even sure, based on the way they wrote December, that December really understood the implications of what was happening with this bully and her friend. So I definitely wouldn't recommend this book. I only gave it 1.5 stars because I thought it had a cool concept. And I liked kind of the concept, but I really couldn't recommend this book to anybody. And it just sucks because this book had such potential to be so much more, and yet it was so lacking. Next up, I read The Witch Boy by Molly Knox Ostertag, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. So this is another graphic novel, and in this book we follow Aster, and he is part of a magical family, and in his family the males become shapeshifters and the women become witches. The problem is that Aster wants to become a witch. He has no desire to be a shapeshifter, and all he wants to do is learn witchery. So he kind of sneaks around and sits in on witchery classes, even though he's not supposed to. And then when he's alone, he ends up practicing these spells and feels he has a bit of a knack for it. The only person he can share this with is a new friend he makes named Charlie, who is a regular human who has no magic and doesn't understand why Aster can't just be a witch. This all comes to a head one day during shapeshifting practice when one of his cousins goes missing. And Aster realizes he might be the only person that has the ability to track down what happened to his cousin. I really enjoyed this book. I loved getting to see Aster come into his own and decide that he was going to be a witch. He knew he was a witch, even if nobody else believed that he was a witch. And I liked getting to see him struggle with that and how his family struggled with that, because it's just a fact in their world. Boys are shapeshifters, girls are witches. And I love getting to see how his relationship with Charlie makes him realize that maybe it doesn't have to be this way. And when his cousin goes missing, I love getting to see that struggle of, do I use this thing my parents have told me, my family has told me I can't use, to find my cousin when nobody else seems to be able to find him? And I really think that if I use this witchery that I've learned, I can track him down. And I just love getting to see that struggle and getting to see him kind of challenge gender norms and trying to figure out a way to say, I know this hasn't been done before and this isn't the way we do it, but I really think that I need to do things my way and do what's best for me. I really enjoyed the story, and I definitely want to read more in this series. And lastly, I read The Sea and Winter by Christine Day, and this is another 5-star prediction novel, so you'll have to wait for my wrap-up to find out what I rated it. In this book, we follow Maisie, who loves ballet. Unfortunately, she got hurt almost a year ago and has not been able to do ballet since. This has been really hard for her, as she's convinced this is what she wants to do with her life, and it's where she's kind of met all of her friends, and it's been a huge struggle for her. Her family has done their best to be supportive, but Maisie feels like they just don't get it. Maisie and her family go on vacation, and this just continues the struggle that she's having with her emotions and everything she's feeling, and the pain she's still feeling in her knee that she wishes would just go away so that she can get back to doing the thing she loves. Unfortunately, this vacation forces her to kind of deal with all of that, whether she's ready to deal with it or not. I loved getting to see this book where Maisie is struggling with the depression she feels because she can't dance right now, and the anxiety she's feeling about the possibility she may never be able to dance again, or even if she can, she might not be able to be the dancer she was before she got injured. And I liked that she didn't quite know how to convey everything that she was feeling. As somebody who has had anxiety since a young age and has also experienced depression as a teen, I know how hard it was for me to try to convey everything I was feeling when I didn't always understand it myself. And I think that Christine Day does a great job conveying that confusion and that fear and the way that those emotions can be expressed without saying, I am anxious, I am depressed, I am worried. And I think it is so interesting to watch Maisie go through this. It's heartbreaking and it's sad, and at least for me, it was super relatable because again, like I said, I know what it was like to be anxious at her age, and like I said, I think Christine Day did a great job getting that across, and I really enjoyed this book. But you'll have to wait till my wrap up to see if it made 5 stars. So I'm gonna try this, but there's no way I'm gonna get them all in frame, because if you stuck with me this long, you know I've read a just insane amount of books during this 7-day period. So I'm just going to slide them on my lap, and whatever you can see is the books you're going to see. So these are some of the books I've read recently. Have you read any of these books? If so, let me know what you thought about them in the comments section below. If you've made it this far in the video, leave me a rainbow emoji. Like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!